Good morning. These are interesting times that we're living in right now, and so we're coming to you to do the Bible study. We'd like for you to be as connected as possible, and so what a blessing it is. Pastor Scott is here and new with us and new among us, and so I'm going to allow him in just a moment to just introduce himself. Many of you met him already, but to know a little bit more about him. Lisa then is to his left. Rochelle is to my right. Abby's in the room, but she's staying hidden. So we do have the five of us here, and we're going to do the best we can for this Bible study. What we want from you is in the comments, if you have any questions or thoughts. Granted, we can't, since this is not live, we can't answer them right away, but we certainly can respond, and what we hope to do then is to do a video with a response on Thursday. If you don't or can't comment in the comments, which makes sense, if you can't comment, then send us an email, and we will certainly respond to that email as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Scott, and just so you know this too, Pastor Scott and I, Pastor Scott's birthday was yesterday. Mine is tomorrow, and so you're kind of sandwiched in between the two of us, and we just wanted to share that with you so that you know that we are aging well and doing just fine. So here's Pastor Scott.
Happy birthday, Bonnie.
Happy birthday, Scott.
Good to be with you all via YouTube and Facebook and any way this gets to you. I am Pastor Scott Nellis, and I'm happy to be with you all. Happy to start my time at All Saints, although a unique start to it.
Yes.
So with social distancing being what it is, I hope to get to know you in the coming weeks in any way that I can. I concluded my first call at Emmanuel Lutheran in New Philadelphia about 2 weeks ago, and my family and I are beginning to look for housing. What else would you like to know? I know that Abby will be sending out an email or a newsletter that has kind of some top 10 facts about me. So again, I really look forward to getting to know all of you, and this will be fun.
So if your questions aren't necessarily about the Bible study, but things that you'd like to know from Pastor Scott, that's okay too. He'll answer any of your questions, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Candidly, yes.
Candidly,
yes. So we are going to be taking a look at the Bible study, and this week we decided to just do the gospel reading. And so we're going to read that gospel. It's a fairly long gospel. And if you want to join with us, if you have your Bibles handy or if you have your phones handy, we're going to be using the New Revised Standard Version, the NRSV. It's John chapter 9, verses 1 through 41.
all of John 9. Yeah.
All of John 9. John chapter 9. Again, if you want to follow along with us, that would be wonderful. It might be a good opportunity for you to take notes as well. And I think what we'll do is I'll go ahead and start reading, and then I'll just stop at a certain point and let Rochelle pick up from there, and then we'll just kind of figure out how we're going to read. All right? As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one will work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes. I just need to stop now and say yuck, but going on. And spread them on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying, I am the man. But they kept asking him, then how are your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. Then I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I do not know.
They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, he put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, what did you say about him? It was your eyes he opened? He said, it was his eyes he opened. He said, he is a prophet.
Let me go next.
Okay.
The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So for the second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered, I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. They said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us? And they drove him out.
Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him. Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, surely we are not blind, are we? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains.
All right. This is the point where I usually say, what did you hear? What questions do you have? And so I will kind of open that up. Did you guys hear anything? Or I have a point that I want to bring out that I think is important. But first I kind of want to open it up and ask if there was anything that raised a question or a thought for you that you wanted to point out.
My question, I think it's going to be a really big question that would lead in a different direction. So if you want to say that's a question for another time. But at the very, very beginning, and I'm where they ask, who sinned?
Yes.
That takes me back to what reading is it where it's the sin upon sins? It talks
Yes.
about the sins to the seventh generation. And that's
Yes.
what it took me to right away, which I have a lot of questions
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. We're not going to, no, you know that's not true. We always talk about whatever question comes up. And so Lisa, Lisa is absolutely right. The disciples now here, I want to point out that it's disciples who are asking that question. But in their tradition, they were used to that it had to either be the sin of the person or the sin of the ancestors, in this case, the sin of the parents, because no one would be born blind unless someone sinned along the way. These are really times when Jesus is trying to get across to people that it's not sin that causes these things to happen. And this is a huge piece here as well, because this is their tradition. And so they're having to wrap their head around, well, if he didn't sin, if this is just something that happened to him, then where are we at now in all of this? So yeah, this is a time, Jesus really is one of those people, not one of the people, the person who came to really kind of change the way we look at things, and especially change the way the Jews looked at things. So Scott, I don't know
I
if you
think
want
it's
to
a
add.
timely question too, because not only with coronavirus, but it's dealing with a topic that we call theodicy, which is why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen at all? And I think it speaks to this need that we all have for like certainty and an answer. And we want to know if something bad happens, if a virus happens, if someone's born blind, if someone gets in a car accident, what caused it? What in God's mind, allowed that to happen? And I love that Jesus is pointing us away from that kind of endless why and who's to blame.
And playing along with that now, there will be people that we hear along the way who are going to say that the coronavirus is God's judgment on us, absolutely, and that we sort of brought this upon ourselves and that kind of thing. And reality is, it is what happens. I mean, there are diseases in the world. This is a disease that happened. It's a new disease. So it isn't that anybody did anything wrong, or that, some people would say it was the ELCA, because we are so open and accepting, and would say that, we're doing something to cause this. And the reality is we're not, except unless you're sneezing and not sneezing into your elbow. I mean, if you're doing that, or if you're not washing your hands or touching your face when you have not sneezed into your elbow. But those kinds of things, that's what causes the spread of this disease. It wasn't caused by God. This is not something that God said, ooh, I'm going to put this down on these people. But you know what? I truly do think that in time to come, I don't know how far down the road, there will be those people who are saying that and they will predict that we did this because of, and here are the reasons why. Jesus in this text is saying that's not it.
And that's not how we ought to look at the situation.
Right.
It's an opportunity for God's love and work to be revealed in this man.
Absolutely. Good question, Lisa. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
This word keeps this little phrase here, and they were divided.
Yeah.
So I always just assumed they were all on the
Aha.
same side.
Yes.
And I just thought he was guilty, or are they saying some?
Well, here's the division. That's a good catch, too, because here's the division. So they're looking at Jesus, who potentially healed this man, and they are well aware of the fact. I mean, this goes to who God is for them, all right, and how they see God. And so what they know about God is that God is the one who can calm the storm. God is the one who can heal the blind. God is the one that can do all these things. So the interesting piece of this goes back to the puzzle pieces I talked about not long ago, is that here's a puzzle piece that Jesus gives to them and says, okay, I've healed this blind person, and that means it's an act from God. All right. So here I'm revealing God to you. Just a little bit at a time, I'm revealing God to you. So the division comes in that part of them are saying, no, he's a sinner, and they're just flat out, he's a sinner. But part of them are seeing the puzzle piece, and part of them are going, wait a minute, only God can heal. Only God can heal. So if only God can heal, he can't do it if he's apart from God. And if he were a sinner, he would be separated from God. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the division comes in is that some people are believing him because they're getting the puzzle pieces. And they're getting the puzzle pieces and putting them together and saying, wait a minute, this is God. This is not out there somewhere. Yeah. So I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
I don't know if I want to add anything to that thought, but what stuck out to me kind of along the lines of people being divided, I kind of looked at all the people who responded to the blind man in this chapter. You have neighbors who said, isn't this the beggar that we knew, and how are his eyes open now? You had Pharisees who then didn't think that that because Jesus was healing and observing the Sabbath, was not observing the Sabbath. They wanted to know, okay, to the blind man who could now see, what do you say about him? And then you had the man's own parents who, kind of wafted a little bit and acted like, well, he's of age, ask him.
Yeah.
And so no one really wanted to own the fact that this could be of God, a miracle from God. Even his own parents, I find that fascinating, that they wanted to distance themselves from him. The neighbors didn't know what to make of it. The Pharisees wanted to be opposed to any kind of healing that Jesus may have done. So.
And to add to that, and I've said it before, I even said it about the woman at the well, because I think when we have an encounter with Jesus, somehow we're changed. And it's not just an internal change, but that we're physically changed. And I believe, as I said in my sermon Sunday, that I believe the woman at the well, the shame was lifted from her shoulders and she could stand up straight, and people saw that change in her physically. And when they saw the change in her physically, they were able to believe on their own what happened. The interesting thing here is I think that the blind man's posture has changed, and people now aren't even recognizing him. The woman at the well, they recognized and they saw the change in her. But here they're going, are you? Because you look different. We think it is. And even mom and dad are, like you said, waffling, because they're going, yeah, that's our son. Yeah, but you know what? He's old enough to talk about, to discuss it on his own. But I have to believe that somewhere in that encounter with Jesus, this man who was born blind and who now has received his sight, his posture is different. He's not just having to sit at the doorway and beg anymore. He's up and he's walking around and his head is held high. And I'm sure there's a piece of joy that's just coming off of his face that I don't think they know what to do with that. I think that's a piece of it too. I think that the Pharisees especially don't know what to do with that. And so they so desperately want to stop Jesus from doing what he's doing that even when they see something that is so miraculous and
good.
So good and so good for this guy, that they don't care and they want to stop Jesus from doing what he's doing. It's a power thing because they're afraid of giving up their own power, but they're seeing in him this incredible power that he has, and they're even more threatened now because of it.
And it's part of the threatening because they would judge that he's somebody that didn't deserve it. If he's used to sitting and not being part of the community, and so Jesus can do that for him.
And the other part of this is, so if this all revolves around sin, so if his parents sinned or he sinned, then for them his sins had to be forgiven. And so they're looking at Jesus then also as being blasphemous.
Yeah.
Because they will say often, the only one who can forgive sins is God.
It's God, yeah.
So if Jesus forgave this man's sins and therefore healed him, then they have to acknowledge that Jesus is God. And they don't want to do that. And so there's some tension there too.
Right.
Yeah.
Bonnie, do you feel like there may be kind of a deeper metaphor kind of lying within this story where the man was not only given his sight, but one sermon I did a while back on this story, I kind of thought that maybe there was something about this man seeing his true value and worth beyond being given the gift of sight, which is, wonderful in and of itself, but he was known his worth and value were now recognized by Jesus. He didn't have to beg. He didn't have to sit and beg and be an outcast. And even in the story, he was driven out a second time, even once he got his sight. So I see a deeper kind of meaning there that Jesus, in a metaphoric way, is saying you don't need to have that position of a beggar
Right.
now.
Right. And it's that whole idea of, and you use the word outcast, is he was seen as unclean, as so many people at that time were. And if they were unclean, they were, out. You're out of the community. And here Jesus is restoring him to the community, just like he did the woman at the well, last week. He's restoring him to the community. And I think there is a deeper thing about that. But the thing is, though, and I think when it has to do with sight, his physical sight was restored. The issue for Jesus is that the Pharisees believe that they're spiritually in tune, and Jesus is basically saying, well, you're seeing this miracle happening, and spiritually you're not acknowledging it, and so you're really blind. You're blind to what's going on, and I think that a deeper issue with that is they're choosing to remain blind, because that whole divided thing, they're divided. Some people, I think, did believe. I mean, we have Nicodemus from back, one of the Pharisees who did come to believe in who Jesus was. And so we have this, and as you know, on Wednesday mornings, my train of thought is gone right now. And so I'll stop talking. This happens every now and then. So if I remember what I'm thinking or talking about, I'll get back to you.
But we do have that tension.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do have that tension.
Yes.
And again, I think if we look at this text only as an opportunity to view the man as being given the gift of sight, we miss a deeper meaning about his value and worth being given back to him by Jesus.
Right.
So knowing that he is beloved, Jesus asking the man at the end, do you believe in the Son of Man? And then he tells man, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. The man had been given the gift of faith, had been given the gift of sight, and his value and honor had been restored. And I think that's the gift.
Absolutely.
That's the takeaway gift, I think.
Absolutely. Because I do think that the restoration, reconciliation to community, that's really something that's going on here too, are two important pieces for Jesus. As we know, he tends to side with the outcast more than the ones who feel inside. Absolutely. Well, Lisa, Rochelle, any other thoughts that you might have before we wrap things up?
I just think it's amazing how even this story, still just with what we're starting to go through now, like hopefully, hopefully we're all able to see through this storm, with the virus going on.
Absolutely.
And so it's just amazing how 2 weeks ago, if we would have read this, we wouldn't even.
Right.
It would just been another story out of the
Good
Bible.
story.
And
Would have been another
and
good
then
story.
We can use it
Right.
as we
Right.
go through this.
Well, and if you heard my sermon on Sunday, and the whole idea of that social distancing now is a good thing because we need to do that, but we also social distance in a bad way. And they were doing that with this man born blind. They were distancing themselves so that they weren't even looking at him anymore. And so I think that's where the worth given back to him is that social distance wasn't there anymore in that bad way.
I think in this time of coronavirus, we need to keep in mind that while we do need to elbow bump and social distance, we're reminded in the Bible today that we do have a need to be touched and healed and known intimately. And we're all hoping and praying that can that we can get back to doing that, because that's what we're made to do.
Yeah. And if the cure for coronavirus is spitting in the mud and mixing it and putting it on our eyes, then so be it. But anyhow, we are happy to have joined you again. We ask if you have comments that you might put them in the comments section, or if you want to email them to us. And then if at all possible, then tomorrow, Thursday, we will get back to you and answer any questions you might have, or share thoughts that you might have as well, because this is a very, very rich text. So for now, from Rochelle, Pastor Bonnie, Pastor Scott, Lisa, and Abby, we say God's blessings be upon you until we can meet again. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.